I watched as 6 elderly women surrounded my 15-year-old daughter in the middle of the weekend market, their fingers pointing in her face as she tried not to cry. "You're being unchristian by refusing to see your grandparents," one of them shouted. Another said, "Those poor orphaned baby brothers need their big sister." My daughter finally saw me rushing toward her, tears streaming down her face. That was the moment I decided my ex-mother-in-law had gone too far. 3 weeks later, her church community had completely turned against her after discovering the beautiful, leather-bound evidence folders I'd strategically placed before Sunday service. My name is Christine, I'm 46 years old, and this is how I protected my daughters from the toxic lies of a woman who thought her position in church would shield her from consequences. When you use your religious community as a weapon against grieving teenagers, don't be surprised when the truth comes packaged in hymnal-style binders with high-quality photo evidence of your son's infidelity. Let me back up a bit and explain how we got here. My ex-husband Mark and I were married for 18 years before I discovered he'd been having an affair with his coworker Veronica for nearly 2 years. Our daughters, Lily, now 17, and Emma, now 15, were the ones who actually uncovered the affair. Lily had borrowed her dad's laptop for a school project when notifications from an unfamiliar email account kept popping up. Being a curious teenager, she clicked on one and found explicit messages and photos that no child should ever see of their parent. The girls came to me immediately, devastated and confused. I confronted Mark that same night, and while he initially tried to deny everything, the evidence was undeniable. I filed for divorce the following week. What I didn't know then was that Veronica was pregnant, with twins no less. Mark moved out and into an apartment with her, leaving our daughters feeling abandoned and betrayed. What happened next still feels surreal. Just 3 months into our divorce proceedings, Mark and Veronica were driving back from a doctor's appointment when they were hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. The impact killed them both instantly. Mark was pronounced dead at the scene, while Veronica, 8 months pregnant, was rushed to the hospital, where they performed an emergency C-section to save the babies. Twin boys named James and Joshua. The twins survived, but suddenly, our already complicated family situation became a nightmare. Mark's parents, Gerald and Martha, who had always been overbearing and judgmental, immediately tried to insert themselves into every aspect of our lives. They showed up at our house the day after the funeral, suitcases in hand, announcing they would be moving in to help with the difficult transition. I politely but firmly declined their offer. My daughters were struggling enough with their father's death and the complicated emotions that come with losing someone who had deeply hurt them. The last thing they needed was their grandparents, who had always criticized my parenting and undermined my authority, living in our home. "We need time and space to heal," I told them. "The girls are seeing a therapist, and we need to establish a new normal." Martha's face hardened. "These girls need their grandparents now more than ever. Mark would have wanted us to be here." "Mark made his choices," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And now I'm making mine as their mother." What I didn't say was that I knew Mark's parents had been aware of his affair for months before I discovered it. I'd found text messages on Mark's phone where they'd advised him to be careful and think about what's at stake, clearly referring to his infidelity without ever suggesting he stop or consider what he was doing to his family. Gerald y Marta left reluctante en ese día, pero estaba lejos del final del asunto. Una semana después, percibí al notario que estaban enfrentando la custodia de mis hijas, alegando que yo era una madre inadecuada, que les estaba alienando de su herencia paterna. Era absurdo, por supuesto. Yo tenía un trabajo estable como administradora de hospitales. Siempre he estado el codo de cuidadora de mis hijas. Their petition included outlandish claims that I was mentally unstable and vindictive toward Mark's memory. But the most bizarre aspect of their petition concerned the twins. They claimed I was refusing to allow my daughters to have a relationship with their baby brothers out of spite, painting me as a monster who was separating siblings. The reality was far different. The twins had been placed with Veronica's cousin and her husband, a decision I fully supported as the most stable option for the newborns. My daughters, still processing their father's betrayal, had expressed no interest in meeting the babies, and their therapist had advised against forcing any relationship before they were emotionally ready. All this legal drama was unfolding while we were still grieving and adjusting to our new reality. I was now a single mother to 2 teenage girls who were dealing with complex trauma. I was working full-time, supporting them through therapy, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in our home. The last thing we needed was a custody battle with their manipulative grandparents. Then things got even more complicated when we discovered Mark's will. Contrary to what he had told me years ago, that he had named our daughters as his beneficiaries, he had actually named his parents. They inherited his personal bank accounts and life insurance policy, totaling nearly $400,000. While I was financially stable enough to support our family without this money, I had always been the primary breadwinner. It hurt to know that Mark had lied about this too, and that money that could have gone toward our daughters' college funds was now in the hands of Gerald and Martha. Despite their newfound financial security, they continued to spread rumors in their church community, but I was somehow leaving them homeless and penniless in their old age. Martha, at 80, and Gerald, at 78, lived in a fully paid-off home and now had a substantial inheritance, yet they played the victims at every opportunity. My daughters and I tried to stay away from the drama as much as possible. We focused on healing and building our new life. The girls continued with therapy. I threw myself into work, and we established new traditions and routines that helped us move forward. We didn't attend the same church as Gerald and Martha. I had only gone occasionally to please Mark, and after the divorce filing, we'd stopped altogether. Which brings us to that fateful Saturday at the weekend market. It was Emma's 15th birthday, and though we had planned a proper party with her friends for later in the month, I wanted to do something special on the actual day. Emma loves the weekend farmers market, especially the artisanal chocolates and pastries that local vendors sell there. I gave her a generous budget and told her to treat herself to whatever she wanted, while Lily and I browsed the fresh produce. After about an hour, I realized I hadn't seen Emma in a while. Just as I was about to call her, my phone rang. It was Emma, her voice shaking as she tried to speak her tears. "Mom, these weird ladies have me cornered by the cheese stand," she sobbed. "They're saying horrible things about you and about how we need to see Grandma and Grandpa." My heart raced as Lily and I rushed through the crowded market, pushing past people until we spotted a circle of older women surrounding my daughter near the artisanal cheese vendor. Emma was backed against the display, clutching her shopping basket, her face streaked with tears as these women, all in their 60s and 70s, towered over her, wagging fingers and speaking in harsh, scolding tones. "You need to honor thy father and mother, and that includes your grandparents," one woman in a floral blouse was saying as we approached. "Those poor little boys need their sisters," another added. "How can you be so selfish?" A third woman, whom I recognized as Judith Porter, a longtime friend of Martha's from church, spotted me approaching and pointed. There she is, the woman who's turned these girls against their Christian heritage. I stepped between them and Emma, my mama bear instincts in full force. "What do you think you're doing, cornering a minor like this? Back off now." "We're trying to talk some sense into this family," Judith replied, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "Martha is heartbroken. First she loses her son, then you cut her off from her granddaughters, and now those poor twin boys are being raised by strangers." I turned to Lily. "Take your sister to the register, pay for her things, and wait for me in the car." I handed her the keys, keeping my voice calm despite the rage building inside me. The girls quickly moved away, Emma still wiping tears from her face. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to the group of women. "How dare you ambush my child on her birthday? What kind of Christian behavior is that, ganging up on a teenager who's still grieving her father?" "She wouldn't be grieving if you hadn't driven Mark away," another woman said. "Martha told us everything, how you refused to have more children, how you made that poor girl be your surrogate, and then rejected the babies because they were boys." It took me a moment to process this absurd lie. Martha had clearly concocted an elaborate fiction to explain the existence of the twins without admitting her son's infidelity. "That is absolutely false," I said, my voice low but intense. "My ex-husband had an affair. Those children were born to his mistress. And you've been fed a pack of lies by a woman who's trying to save face at the expense of her grieving granddaughters. You're the liar, Judith shot back. A good Christian wife would obey her in-laws and honor her husband's memory. By this point, our confrontation had drawn attention. The market manager approached, asking us to leave if we couldn't keep our voices down. I was happy to go, but these women followed me all the way to the parking lot, continuing their verbal assault as I walked briskly to my car. I found the girls inside, both of them in tears. Emma was shaking, her birthday thoroughly ruined by the ambush. "I'm so sorry, baby," I said, starting the car. "Those women had no right to approach you like that." "Grandma must have sent them," Lily said bitterly. "She's always trying to make us feel guilty about the twins, like we're supposed to just forget what Dad did and play happy family." I drove home in silence, my mind racing. This wasn't the first time Martha had tried to manipulate the situation, but sending church members to publicly harass my daughter was crossing a line I couldn't ignore. Something had to be done. After the girls went to bed that night, still upset from the market incident, I messaged an old acquaintance from Martha and Gerald's church, Tom Stevens, a deacon who had always been kind to our family, and who I knew to be more reasonable than some of the more extremist members. I explained what had happened and asked if he knew anything about it. Tom's response was apologetic and revealing. "I'm so sorry this happened, Christine. Martha has been posting in the church Facebook group about your family situation, but her version is quite different from what I know to be true. She's painted herself and Gerald as victims who've lost everything, their son, their granddaughters, and now the twin boys. She's claiming you're keeping the girls from them out of spite, and that you rejected the twins because they're boys." He sent me screenshots of Martha's posts, long, emotionally manipulative narratives that portrayed her and Gerald as saintly grandparents cruelly cut off from their family. In her twisted version, Zoronica had been our surrogate because I selfishly refused to have more children, and after the babies were born, I rejected them because they weren't girls. According to Martha, I was now leaving them homeless and penniless in their old age while also alienating my daughters from their Christian heritage. I was stunned by the audacity of these lies, but also by how effectively they had worked. The comment section was filled with outrage on Martha's behalf, with church members offering prayers, support, and apparently volunteering to confront my family in public. "The church takes a very strong stance against adultery," Tom explained. "I think Martha created this surrogate story to avoid admitting Mark's infidelity." That's when I realized how to address this situation. This church, for all its faults regarding LGBTQ+ issues and women's roles, did hold firm to certain moral principles, chief among them the sanctity of marriage and the sin of adultery. Martha had carefully crafted a narrative that cast me as the villain while protecting her son's reputation. It was time for the truth to come out. The next day was Sunday, but I took Monday off work. I spent the day gathering evidence, the text messages between Mark and Veronica that had been recovered from his phone, the conversations between Mark and his parents where they acknowledged and enabled his affair, emails and texts from Martha and Gerald to my daughters after Mark's death, where they blamed the girls for their father's accident because they had forced the divorce by revealing the affair. The most damning piece of evidence was a text Martha had sent Lily just 2 days after her father's funeral. "If you hadn't been such a nosy brat and minded your own business, your father would still be alive. Those innocent babies would have their parents. You and your sister are bastards who destroyed this family." I took all of this evidence to a print shop and had it professionally printed on high-quality paper. I spent extra for color printing where necessary, particularly for the photos that clearly showed Mark and Veronica together, images that made it impossible to mistake her for me or to believe the surrogate lie. I organized everything chronologically, added explanatory notes where needed, and had it all bound in leather folders that resembled the hymnals used at their church. On the cover, I placed a simple title, "The Truth About Mark Wilson." Inside, the first page contained a photo of Mark and Veronica kissing in our living room, their faces clearly visible, no room for denial. Beneath it, I wrote, "Mark Wilson and Veronica Carter's love story, the truth Martha and Gerald don't want you to know." The next Sunday morning, While Martha and Gerald's church service was in progress, I quietly slipped into the back of the building. There was a table there where extra hymnals and service programs were kept for visitors or members who forgot their own. I placed my evidence binders among them, enough for about 20 people to find. Then I left and went home to my daughters, telling them only that I had taken steps to address Martha's lies and the harassment they had faced. The results were swift and dramatic. By Sunday afternoon, the church's Facebook group was buzzing with shock and outrage, not at me this time, but at Martha and Gerald. Members who had discovered the binders had shared their contents with others, and the truth spread like wildfire. "I can't believe Martha lied to all of us," one comment read. "Using the church to spread falsehoods is a sin itself." "Those poor girls," wrote another, "to lose their father that way, and then be blamed for his death by their own grandparents. Shameful." The pastor himself eventually had to intervene in the online discussion, urging members to remember Christian forgiveness, while also acknowledging that deception within our community cannot be tolerated. Interestingly, while many members expressed sympathy for my daughters and me, some still found a way to cast judgment. While divorce is never God's plan, it is understandable that Christine failed in her wifely duties after such a shock. Perhaps one day she will return to the light, unlike her cheating husband and his Jezebel. They used another word for Veronica that I won't repeat here. I received 2 written apologies in the mail addressed to my daughters, along with an invitation for our family to join the church for support during this difficult time, an offer I politely declined. As for Martha and Gerald, the consequences were immediate and significant. According to Tom, they attended the following Sunday's service, but were met with cold shoulders and whispers. The community that had once rallied around them now viewed them with suspicion and disappointment. The elderly couple who had claimed to be pillars of Christian virtue were exposed as enablers of adultery and emotional abusers of their own granddaughters. Within 3 weeks, Martha and Gerald stopped attending church altogether. Martha posted a self-pitying message on her personal Facebook page, lamenting how no one cares for the elderly anymore, and how she wished her great son were still alive, since he would have taken care of us properly. I had to laugh at that one. Mark had been financially dependent on me for most of our marriage. His parents' inheritance came from the life insurance policy I had insisted he maintain. As for the custody battle, it quickly fizzled out after the church incident. Their attorney contacted mine to withdraw their petition, citing health concerns that prevented them from taking on the responsibility of teenage girls. The truth, I suspect, was that they knew their case was hopeless now that their character and honesty had been so publicly questioned. The twins, James and Joshua, are thriving with Veronica's cousin and her husband, who formally adopted them 6 months after the accident. I've established a cordial relationship with the couple and have left the door open for my daughters to connect with their half-brothers when and if they feel ready. Lily has recently expressed some interest in meeting them, though Emma is still reluctant. Their therapist continues to guide us through this process, emphasizing that there's no right timeline for healing. My daughters and I have found our new normal. Lily is looking at colleges now, focused on psychology programs, inspired by her own experience with therapy. Emma has joined the school newspaper and seems to be channeling her feelings into writing. I'm dating again, cautiously, a nice man named James who teaches history at the local community college and who understands our complicated family dynamics. We still occasionally hear rumors about Martha and Gerald's latest complaints or accusations, but they hold no power over us anymore. The truth is our shield, and we've learned that sometimes the best revenge against toxic people isn't confrontation or legal battles. It's simply exposing their lies with irrefutable evidence and letting them face the natural consequences of their actions. For any parent dealing with manipulative ex-in-laws or former spouses who use religion or community as weapons, remember this: truth has a power all its own. Document everything. Keep your communications clear and factual. And when necessary, present the evidence in a format that cannot be ignored or denied. Even if that means creating leather-bound binders of receipts that look right at home next to church hymnals. Those who weaponize faith against children deserve to have their own congregations see them for who they truly are. Sometimes, the most righteous revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself.